All right, welcome everyone to our webinar today. I can see some people joining. Today is Boosting Conversions, the 5-step user journey optimization. My name is Eddie Casado. I'm the Senior Growth Marketing Manager at Mouseflow, and I'm joined by one of our certified partners, Rawnet, Georgie Wells, Optimization Strategist. Georgie, how are you doing?
Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So we have a jam-packed session with tons of stuff. So without further ado, we'll just jump right in to the good stuff. All right. So a little bit about Mouseflow for those of you that don't know what we do. We are a behavior analytics company, and we essentially focus on showing you the why behind the numbers, right? So you get the traditional metrics, and then through us, you get session replays, heat maps, conversion funnels, and a lot of stuff that George is going to be showing you today. We're trusted by more than 220,000 customers around the world, and we have been recognized as a leader in our industry by G2 and our own customers. As I mentioned, we provide value through actionable insights, through various means like session replay, heat maps, conversion funnels, feedback surveys, you name it. It will all make sense after Georgie gets into the process, I promise. We do event notification and reports so that you can easily identify when things are going awry on your website. And we provide automatic friction detection and segmentation so that you can immediately find those problems and start fixing your site instead of finding what's wrong with it. Georgie, maybe a few words about Rawnet and what you guys do?
Yeah. So to introduce Rawnet, we're a UK-based digital agency with clients across B2B and B2C. We work really closely with our clients and really believe in the power of partnerships and sort of have an understanding that in today's digital landscape, it's not just about services, but also about crafting strategic, scalable and commercially viable solutions. And then what we do, I won't go into detail on these now, but as an overview, we can craft brand stories, optimize digital products, design and create high converting customer journeys, and generate demand for your brand through marketing too.
Great. All right. So with that short intro, a few of the takeaways for today's session so that you know what's coming down the pipeline. You'll learn how to analyze user behavior with Google Analytics and Mouseflow, conduct qualitative research to uncover hidden friction points, improve user interactions by optimizing CTAs and forms, continuously iterate on your test and drive actionable insights from your users' behavior. And now it's the time that Georgie actually takes over. Let me just give her remote control here. And Georgie, can you test if you can move? There you go. I think I see some movement. Great. So the floor is yours, as they say.
Get back to that slide. Oh, we're skipping ahead now.
Oh no, want to go back? There you go.
Okay. Cool. So today we're going to be diving into the fairly big topic of optimization, but we've broken it down into 5 steps for you to take away and sort of follow for yourselves at the end. So to begin with, I just wanted to talk you through the process that we follow here at Rawnet for optimization and why we do it in this way. So here we've got this infinity loop diagram, which essentially is sort of trying to show that optimization is a kind of forever thing and it's not a one-off project, but a constant journey of sort of making things better. So every time that we tweak or fix or test something, we're basically leveling up on our business goals and then constantly improving upon what we have. So every time that we cycle around this, this infinity loop, we're sort of creating a new standard each time. So there's 2 parts to the process. There's the left-hand side, which is your sort of research and investigative cycle. And this is where we really get to know your customers and what they're up to on the website. And then on the right-hand side, we've got the validation and improvement stage. So this is where things really come together. We take what we've learned on the left-hand side, and then we put it to the test and monitor improvements on the right. So it's really important to note that the more thorough the research that you do on the left and the greater understanding we have about your customers, the better the ideas and actions that we suggest and we test on the right-hand side, and in turn, the sort of better results that we're going to get from those tests. So that's all why we look at the optimization process in this way. So you might then be wondering how that works in the context of a 5-step process. So this is typically the sort of 5-step process that we follow. And we'll always start with research, so diving into the customer's mind to understand their motivations, their needs, their frustrations. In step 2, we then ideate and create a hypothesis. So this is where we can come up with lots of cool ideas, but not every idea will then make the cut. So in step 3, we'll prioritize those ideas, only focusing on the ones that are going to deliver the most potential. Then we need to decide if those ideas are for testing, changes, or bug fixes, as not everything has to go through the A/B testing process. So the way we do that is if we're uncertain or we want to learn something new, then we'll test it. If it's a clear fix based on best practices, we'll roll with it as a change, but we'll, of course, keep an eye on the changes and make sure they're actually giving us the results that we're after. And then if it's a bug, we'll just get it fixed as soon as possible, especially if it's a high priority one. So if we're then moving forwards with testing, we'll brief our developers, set up our A/B test, and then finally, step 5 will be analysing the results. If successful, we'll implement the changes. If inconclusive, we go back to the ideation step and refine and retest the idea. And if it's not successful, then we'll just abandon the idea completely. So hopefully that gives you a brief sort of top level overview of the process. And what we're going to look at next is diving into some specific examples using one of our clients. Cool. So the client we're going to be using for our examples today is called Dignity. So Dignity is a leading provider of funeral-related services in the UK, and they're really dedicated to delivering exceptional care and services to individuals during quite a challenging time, and customers are really at the heart of what they do. So in August 2022, Rawnet helped Dignity to launch a website called Dignity Funeral Plans, and this was an entirely new product for the company, which essentially helps people to create their own funeral plans online or create a funeral plan for a loved one, which is a great way to share final wishes, cover costs, and just make sure that those sort of hard decisions and financial outlays aren't left up to your loved ones. So the website essentially takes users through a series of questions where they can choose things like flowers, songs, readings, transport, coffin type, etc., which allows users to plan and pay for their funerals in advance. And previous to the site actually launching, all of the funeral plans were serviced via their call centres and their funeral director branches. So the new site was really a way of delivering that plan creation online so that customers could do it at their own pace. And also we could then offer customers more options so they can better customise it around their own wishes. Skip ahead. So what was the client problem we were trying to fix? So it wasn't necessarily a problem because the site's done really well, but there was no previous website that we could compare results to. And we really wanted to monitor how users were interacting with this brand new product, how it was performing, how we could continue to optimize it so that users were having a nicer experience, rather than just sort of launching something new and then just hoping it was doing okay. So in our initial months of website monitoring, we identified sort of 3 key areas for optimization. Firstly, the homepage had low user engagement and struggled to effectively direct users to key pages. And we managed to successfully boost visits to these pages by 285%. Secondly, we addressed a significant drop-off at the very start of the planning journey, but we made some changes and achieved a 24% reduction in the drop-off percentage on this page. And then lastly, we found that users were also abandoning the free guide form page, but our efforts resulted in a 60% increase in free guide form completions. So in the next few slides, we're going to be talking through our 5-step process in a bit more detail, how we actually uncovered these issues that we found. And then at the end, we'll share what we actually tested to get the results that we did for these 3 key areas. So let's dive into step 1, which is research. So as well as optimization being sort of vital for reaching business goals, it is really also about getting a grip on your customers and sort of steering you in the right direction for the ideas that you actually come up with. So the research stage feels big because we've got these sort of 6 micro steps, kind of like a process within a process. But it's important to remember that it's not actually a strict step-by-step deal when it comes to the research. It's much better to sort of picture it as a toolbox, so you can pick the right research methods for the job depending on you know, what your website or what your client's website's needs are. So when you actually come to doing this, you might only want to pick 2 or 3 of these research methods when you do step 1 in the process. However, today we're going to cover off all 6 of these research methods so that you can sort of get an idea of what you could use. So let's jump into these in more detail. Starting with web analytics. So web analytics is crucial when working with any client, and it's a vital starting point in the conversion research journey, as it swiftly pinpoints those areas that might need closer examination on your website. So in tools like Google Analytics, we'll start by focusing on landing pages and pages report. And these are the reports that sort of show where your traffic's going and how it's performing. So a valuable tip there is to pinpoint the underperforming top pages within your top 10 list. And these are the pages that attract significant traffic. So they're the ones that are in your top 10, but they might have unusually high bounce rates or maybe lower than average conversion rates. And this is the method that sort of helped us quickly spot which were Dignity's top underperforming pages, which we then tackle first. Then we can move on to device split. So understanding your users' device preferences. If mobile users are dominating, we'll prioritize optimizing the mobile journey. In the case of Dignity, it was a fairly even split in terms of device usage. So we kind of started by focusing on both desktop and mobile journeys for them and just seeing where the frictions were. And then finally, conversion rate and bounce rate analysis. So we'd look at these numbers by page, where your traffic comes from and what device they use. So if we maybe find a traffic source that's not performing well, it might mean that your marketing team needs to look at the targeting, as if you have poor quality traffic, it's going to make optimization a pretty tough gig. And then on the other hand, you could uncover a new traffic source that could really boost your optimization efforts, maybe something you've not tapped into before, like email automation for abandoned carts and things like that. So just focusing on those sort of 3 or 4 aspects initially will provide valuable insight into what's actually going on the website at a very top level. So moving on to the second research method in our toolbox, which is funnels. So once we then pinpointed Dignity's key areas using web analytics, we focused on setting up user journey funnels in Mouseflow. And this was really a crucial step for Dignity because their website involves a step-by-step process, and sometimes creating a plan can span up to 20 steps for a full funeral plan. So that was really important. And then also, since it was a new website, as I've mentioned, and we had limited insights into customer behavior and what they were actually doing on the website, setting up funnels was sort of a top priority for us because we wanted to see how they were using that journey. So in Mouseflow, funnel mapping allowed us to map out the journeys effortlessly. It's really easy to do, and it sheds light on pages that sort of have the highest drop-offs, and also gives you a friction score when you're looking at the drop-offs, which is a value that Mouseflow creates that sort of quantifies the user's level of frustration, I guess, with their website experience on that page. So that also helps you identify poorly performing pages.
That is correct, Georgie. And if I may butt in here, so that the audience knows what we're referring to as friction score is our way of actually quantifying or ranking the sessions that we capture on Mouseflow, and that's based out of 6 or plus friction events, unique friction events that are automatically identified without the need of any extra setup or any extra plan. It's included in our plan, so it's important to mention that this is something that you get automatically as soon as you start capturing users or sessions on Mouseflow, and you can actually apply that throughout features. But more specifically in funnels is super useful because the moment you can identify that friction, even right there on the page, you get a little number of how high the friction score is for that page, then you know immediately where to go to, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I just want to mention something. I see that we have a question in the Q&A. We will be answering. Please shoot your questions freely, but we will be answering your questions offline after the webinar because we have a jam-packed session today, and unfortunately, we won't have time to cover all questions. All right, that's for the audience.
So with funnels, taking the case of Dignity, we saw a glaring 98% drop-off emerging between the initial planning page and purchase completion. So clearly somewhere from the start of the journey to the end, users were dropping off. And then by digging deeper into the drop-off rates in the funnels and using the page friction scores, we identified culprits like the home page, the first and last planning pages, and the free guide form were contributing to these drop-offs, along with a few other pages in the checkout journey. So just another top tip with funnels is that once you've actually identified your problematic pages, you see which ones have the higher friction scores, clicking this little watch dropped button in blue that you can see on the right is a really quick way to view session recordings of people who are dropping off on that page, as you can then see and watch the specific issues they're encountering. And the other thing that's really good in Mouseflow with funnels and across Mouseflow actually is that you can filter on everything. So you could actually filter on your funnels to analyze differences based on device, traffic source, and a load of other available filters as well, which is really handy. Cool. So next up in our research toolbox is heat maps. So once we've then identified the pages we want to investigate using web analytics and funnels, so we know where people are dropping off, we then turn to heat maps, as these are sort of visual guides that can reveal users' interactions on the website. So we can see where people are clicking, where they're not clicking, how far they're scrolling, and more. So for Dignity, we found that on the homepage, despite it being such a high traffic page for them and really being in a really prominent position, it lacked a lot of interaction. And the section with the most visibility didn't really utilize any clear call to actions or guidance for users. So our thoughts turned to sort of, if we move and improve the guidance, could that potentially increase interaction and click-through rates here? Scroll maps also indicated that on the homepage, around 30% were dropping off before they even reached these two call to actions, further highlighting the need to place some more crucial content and call to actions above the page fold line. And then the other thing on the homepage was that users were actually attempting to click non-clickable items, which then highlights the usefulness in heat maps of sort of uncovering patterns of user behavior or errors on websites that you can quickly fix. You don't need to test, you can just sort of change that. And then finally, on the first page of the planning journey, which is the top right screenshot here, the start planning button, which is the bottom right of that screenshot, was being clicked significantly more than the required PDFs, which are sort of in the middle there. And the PDF links actually needed to be viewed in order to progress to the next step. So users would have been clicking start planning, but then nothing would have been happening because they weren't viewing the PDF documents. So although we didn't quite understand what exactly was going on there, we knew that that didn't feel right in terms of the number of clicks each of those was getting. So it sort of highlighted a potential usability issue that we needed to investigate further. So top tip when reviewing heat maps is that what I find is that they're really, really useful on their own in helping you understand where users are clicking and scrolling. But for me, they become really powerful when you use them in tandem with your recording so that you can then really understand the context of what's actually going on and give you a really clear picture of the user behavior on your website. So next in our research toolbox, we then turn to recordings to get the full picture of what was going on. So we focused in on that first question in the planning step, as we really wanted to understand what was happening when users were clicking that start planning button, but they hadn't viewed those PDF documents. So as you can see in this video that I'll just start playing, we found that many users were sort of missing the requirement to read both of the documents before clicking start planning, which then led to frustration as they seemed to be confused as to why it wasn't letting them move to the next step. And the website wasn't giving them any feedback to say that they needed to read the documents. So some advice, just if you do choose to use recordings as one of your research methods, have a clear goal when reviewing recordings, whether that's identifying usability issues or identifying bugs or improving a specific page. Just make sure that you know which journeys or pages you want to look at so you don't spend hours watching recordings with no clear direction. I'd advise focusing on around 10 to 15 videos related to your target page. Skip through the short recordings with minimal interactions. And I find it really useful to use the friction score filter in Mouseflow. So you can actually filter by unhappy or very unhappy users. And that will just sort of filter on the recordings where you can identify potential problems.
I think it's crucial, Georgie, if I may, it's crucial to see and also highlight that if you're looking at the recording, when they click no, I don't, and then they hover over to the start planning and it's not enabled, that this is something that traditional analytics would just report that there was a click on the no button if you have it tagged, but then you wouldn't know what's going on and why did they move to the next step. So I think it's super important to highlight to the audience that this is a type of qualitative information and insights that you would get from just watching a recording, as long as you follow the little steps that you mentioned about having a clear goal and knowing where to actually go. I think it's important to highlight those.
Definitely. And then once you're viewing your recordings as well, it's just about sort of paying close attention to user actions, identifying the sticking points, and actually noting down the recurring patterns. So for example, with this one, the issue on the planning page was sort of widespread in a lot of the recordings that we were watching. So straight away, we knew that it was an issue that we needed to resolve. But the handy thing in Mouseflow as well is that you're able to star recordings, you can add tags or comments as you're watching it. And you can also share the links, which I do quite often, so that you can then revisit your findings and assess how frequently that actually occurred, which is also really useful for sharing with clients, so that they can actually see. You don't have to try and explain it. You can just send them the video, which is really good.
Yeah, that evidence-based, you know, it's super important, especially because if you share the recording with a client, and let's say in your scenario, they don't have to log into Mouseflow. They can publicly view that recording, and that way just easier, and it expedites a little bit of the stakeholder management, and also the facilitating the speed of at which we move, researching, or even starting to hypothesize what to create next.
Cool. So next up in our research toolbox is user feedback. So if you still have questions about what your customers think of your website, or what you want to know why they're leaving without completing certain actions, user feedback can be really useful. So for Dignity, even though we felt like we had a good grasp of what was happening in key areas, we still wanted to hear directly from users. So we began with a broad exit survey covering the whole website. And I'd say as a tip, when you're looking at your survey strategy, starting with a wide survey net to gather initial feedback from various pages is really good, because it gives you an overview of sort of user sentiments and how they're feeling about the website. And then later on, you can then customize specific questions to get specific insights. So after our initial successful survey, we then set up a post-purchase survey, which is the screenshot top right, which can gauge, it gives you an NPS score, and it can kind of help you gauge how users who did actually buy a plan, how they felt about the website. We also then created 7 more exit surveys, which were each tailored to specific pages with contextual questions. And those surveys have been really invaluable for Dignity and have provided a lot of insight for us and the team. So once you've gathered all of your survey feedback, just make sure that you analyze the results by finding trends, pain points, and actually turning those insights into actionable steps aligned with your goals. For example, recently we've been receiving a lot of feedback on our exit survey about users not understanding the pricing of the funeral plans until the very end of the journey. So that's now prompted us to make some changes and do some tests around showing the cost breakdown through the planning process, or even earlier on in the journey, showing like from pricing on the homepage. So yeah, and then a couple of other key tips with surveys. A lot of people will often get very low response rates on the pages they're showing surveys. So just revise your questions and triggers, make sure it's very clear and concise as to what you're asking people, and experiment with like the phrasing and the timing and placement as well. And those small adjustments can help boost your response rates on surveys. And once you've gathered enough insights, just stop the survey. There's no point running it longer than it needs to be run. So moving on to our final research method today, which is heuristic analysis. So whilst we didn't initially use this for Dignity, I did want to highlight it as a method because it's a really quick way to gain insights and practical recommendations for improving your website's user experience. So you might be thinking, what the hell is a heuristic analysis, or are heuristics? So heuristic analysis is all about gauging how user-friendly your website is. And think of the actual word heuristics as mental shortcuts and cues that people have as they navigate a website. So for example, you click a button and you get a little loading icon on the button to signify something's happening. You get a thank you message after you've submitted a form to confirm that that action was successful. You've got breadcrumbs to help you know where you are on the site so you don't feel lost, or even back buttons to help you get back to where you might want to be. And there's lots of examples like this that you probably don't consciously realize now, but the absence of those cues and shortcuts can significantly impact your user experience. And heuristics are sort of overlooked often, but they do play a vital role in the website navigation and basically help ensuring that your design smoothly guides users through the website and provides feedback and subtle guidance along the way.
Yeah, just to mention here for the audience that you don't have to worry about taking note of this right now. We're going to be sending this later on after the webinar, so that you can check out all of these good resources.
Yeah, so one of those, the way that we perform heuristic analysis is through this website, which basically gives you a set of questions, and then the tool provides you with a usability score at the end and breaks it down by each area of the website to help you pinpoint where your weak areas are that you need to work on improving. Usually to perform heuristic analysis, a UX or CRO expert will review your website for those missing cues and shortcuts. Anyone can do it, but involving an expert, if you're not as confident with UX, can give you a bit more of an accurate result, because the questions are all based around best practices, but when you answer it, your answers can still be somewhat subjective. So sometimes it's quite handy to get an expert involved. And then the real key with heuristic analysis really is just creating and prioritizing the tasks at the end to address the findings and improve your website user experience. So that was sort of step one, which was obviously the biggest step with research, because we showed you all of the different methods you could use. But as I said, you wouldn't have to use all of those methods, just choose the ones that work for you and are needed for your specific website. So now we'll move on to step two, which is ideation. So this is really when the fun starts. So you can start to be creative and put all of those insights to work and collaborate with other team members. Often when we get to this stage, insights can be easily lost or forgotten about. So it's always important to come back to the research that you've just done. And something that we use to keep track of that is Mouseflow's Mirror Board template, where you can gather all your research findings, add in actions off the back of those insights, which will help you streamline all your findings into one document that all of your team members can work from. And after sorting out all of those insights, just gather together with relevant team members, whether that's design, UX, CRO, product strategists, and just start to collaborate on those testing ideas. So to summarize some quick wins for ideation, make sure that you're using your insights to drive the ideation and don't fall into the trap of sort of running away with ideas that haven't derived from your insights, which can happen quite often. Keep your research and ideas centralized in one document just to ensure nothing gets overlooked. This stage should be all about collaboration. So make sure that you have meetings set up with people from different skill sets to broaden the test ideas. And finally, getting something down visually can help you to, you and the client, to see whether it's something you actually want to take further. And those designs and mock-ups don't have to be perfect at all. You don't need a designer to do it. It's just something you can quickly get down in Figma or any other design tool to visualize those ideas. So once we then have the list of ideas that we then want to move on to crafting a robust A/B testing roadmap. So our go-to method for prioritization is pie scoring, but there's loads of other approaches that can fit too. It's just something that I've always used. Pie scoring evaluates ideas based on potential importance and ease, and that helps us prioritize the most impactful, significant, and sort of like manageable ideas. And then finally, once we've got that list of ideas prioritized, we'll select the tests, put them in a sequence in our Jira optimization backlog so that they're ready to be moved forwards with. So some key points for effective test prioritization. Firstly, focus on impact. So just prioritize the tests that have the potential to actually bring about significant improvements in the metrics, and make sure that the effort required for those is manageable. It's not going to take you weeks and weeks to actually build that test. Secondly, control the roadmap size. So maintain a reasonable number of tests in your backlog, avoid overwhelming it with loads and loads of suggestions that could then mean that you never ever get to the tests that are at the bottom of the list. So I'd say that quality is definitely better than quantity in that instant. Then stakeholder involvement. So involve stakeholders in the process of prioritization, as getting insights from different perspectives when you're doing something like pie scoring can reduce the subjectivity in determining that order. And then finally, just recognize that optimization is an ongoing journey and be prepared for things to move around, and flexibility is really key there, and just refining your roadmap is going to be a continuous process, so just be prepared for that. So step number 4 is all about action and getting your first test set up in the testing platform. So the first thing we need to do in order to get the test set up is we need to write a brief. So we write up a very structured brief with lots of detail around the problem, the solution, our hypothesis, success metrics, so which goals are we going to use, what's our targeting, and then links to the design so that the developers have everything they need to be able to set the test up in whatever platform you choose to use. And this is an example of the sort of brief that we'd use on the right-hand side here. So just a few things to make sure that that test setup and the brief all goes smoothly. So firstly, just ensure that your brief's really clear and includes absolutely all the details that your developers might need, so there's no back and forth. Secondly, make sure that there's a rigorous QA process in place before the test gets launched, just to make sure that it's all working as it should be and you haven't broken anything on the website. Also make sure that your testing tool is integrated with Mouseflow if you're using Mouseflow, so that you can then filter on the test variation when you're looking at recordings or heat maps to analyze how the test performed from a user behavior perspective. So we've had it in the past where a test might have been inconclusive, and then it's really hard to explain to the client why that test was inconclusive. But if you've got the user behavior analytics to back it up and give you a bit more information as to why that might have been inconclusive and what were people doing in that variation, it can be really useful to go back to the client with to give them some sort of explanation. And then finally, just make sure your goals are all set up and firing correctly, as your test is going to be running for probably a minimum of 2 weeks. So you don't want to get to the end of the 2 weeks and find out that your goals weren't triggering in the right way. So always make sure that they're set up correctly from the start. And now for the final step. So imagine your test has been running for a few weeks, or it's reached statistical significance and you come to analyze the results. So firstly, your testing tool should tell you most of the stats that you need to be able to evaluate how your variation performed against the original. And it should actually tell you whether it's one or not, which is quite handy. But I'd also suggest using the heat maps and user behavior analysis to be able to see how users interacted with the test variation, as that can be really useful to understand why it performed the way it did. Use the learnings from the test that you ran to inform future test ideas. You might want to iterate and maybe take the test one step further. And then finally, just don't be disappointed if your test didn't win, because it's all a learning process and you would have actually just mitigated the risk of just putting that live as a change without testing it.
That's a nice way of looking at it.
Yeah. So here's a few examples of the tests that we actually ran on Dignity based on the insights we found through the research methods I just took you through. So the first one was that initial planning page. So we tested a revised version of the page, which actually removed the 2 documents that were causing friction for the user. Also removed unnecessary additional questions that users were getting when they were clicking yes. So overall, we were just simplifying the page, and that saw a 24 percentage point decrease in the drop-off rate from the first page of the journey. So a lot more users were getting past this step quicker and easier, and completing that first question and removing all that frustration that we saw in the Mouseflow recording earlier. The second one was where we'd recognise the lack of call to actions in the and guidance through the Mouseflow heat maps on the homepage. And we also had some exit survey feedback as well, which we noticed a lot of users were saying that they needed more time to think. They weren't quite ready to go straight into the planning process. So we basically added 3 call to action options above the fold that gave users, different user types, different journeys, essentially. The first one was, I have an idea of what I'd like leading to the planning journey. Second one was, I'm not sure what I'd like leading to the stories and inspiration page. And then the final one was, I still need more information leading to the free guide. And this test saw a 285% uplift across the 3 pages that we were guiding users to. And it also saw benefits to the secondary metrics, such as free guide form completions, plan purchases, and also engagement metrics too. So that one was a really good result. And then finally, we also wanted to do something about the drop-off that we were seeing on the form completions for free guides, as we knew that the conversion rate for users who did actually get a free guide was much higher than those who didn't. So we explored Mouseflow to see what users were doing on this page. And what we actually found was, on the version on the right, users weren't actually bothering to click into the button that takes users to the form. So we thought, to simplify this and reduce the clicks, we would just test embedding the form directly on this page, which is really simple, but does show, firstly, how lazy we are as humans, and secondly, that, the form, they might have thought maybe the form was longer than it actually was. And this resulted in a 60% uplift in form completions for free guides. So even a simple change like that can have really positive results. So that concludes the 5 steps for user journey optimization. Thank you very much for listening. I'll hand over to Eddie.
Thank you, Georgie. I mean, it's great to see. I've told you this already during our practice sessions. It's great to see at Master at Works because it validates a lot of the stuff that we inadvertently are doing in the process of optimizing a page, but putting this framework into paper and having you walk us through how you actually achieve those great results. I think it's great insights. And now it says your turn because I mean we always try to leave the audience with a little bit of a homework. I see we have 6 questions, so I'll try to breeze through this last slide so that we can get to the Q&A because I wasn't expecting that we would do, but let's try to do it now. So the homework for you, those of us that are watching, step 1 is to choose 2 or 3 research methods that Georgie mentioned in the first step to gather findings in a Miro board. Create a list of the tests and ideas and create mock-ups on step 2. For step 3, prioritize your list your ideas on a list. On step 4, draft a brief of your top priority idea using the I score, whatever you use for prioritization. Just make sure that you're using some system to prioritize the ideas. And then in step 5 is just monitor and analyze results. And I think it's rinse and repeat, right? We missed that that last step there. So I'm just going to stop sharing screen now, and remember that you will get a copy of this recording and a copy of the presentation plus a list of all the resources that we mentioned today. And we're going to head into this short Q&A. We have a few minutes to go, so let me just pull up the Q&A here. Yes, so the presentation, like I mentioned, will be distributed at the end. So Camilo asked the question, the interpretation of the results in the recordings and heat maps is mostly subjective. There are some best practices to guarantee that the interpretation is objective and accurate. Bergie, did you follow any best practices outside of the tips that you mentioned earlier on the session?
So I think the reason we use them all together is so that we can get a bit more of a full picture, because when you are watching recordings or heat map or looking at a heat map, you are still questioning whether it still sort of is an assumption. So that's why if we look at a heat map and we see an issue, we'll then go to a recording and try and understand that a bit further. The one thing that was missing from which is actually in the deck but is missing from the presentation, was user testing as well. So we do also use user testing through usertesting.com or Usability Hub, and that's when you can actually speak to real customers and validate those issues with less subjectivity, I guess.
Right. So it's about, Camilo, it's not so much about following best practices and finding the actual truth, but informing your process to finding that truth. And that's how Mouseflow actually helps you build a case and improve your confidence. I know that that's an I-score. Confidence is one of those meters that you use to an extent guarantee that whatever you put out, it's going to have some positive results. Now, this is not set in stone, but I know the pain of having to watch millions of sessions. I know the pain of looking at a heat map page and not exactly know what you're looking for. So that's super important that you understand what you're trying to look for, and that you also use tools like the friction score or the friction events as you look through your data, so that you can get to that gold pot, right? So if you use the friction score in Mouseflow, you'll immediately see, rank all of your sessions from worst to the best, and then see who are the ones that are struggling the most, find patterns like Georgie suggested. So if this is recurring in multiple recordings, then you fine tune your your research process, right? And you see, okay, so this seems to be something that is repetitive. It's a pattern. Let me try to find more evidence. And once you get a good bunch of evidence, then you move forward with a hypothesis to fix it. If there's something that needs to be fixed, if it's a bug like Georgie mentioned, or if it's something that needs to be changed, if it's part of best practices. So I think it's important to understand that the question is as important as the answer. So this software's, you need to know the question you ask them, because like you're saying, Camilo, it's subjective. So at the end, if you feed it something that's wrong, you inevitably get a wrong result on the other side. Moving on, a lot of people saying thank you, saying that it's a great session, Georgie. So kudos to you who handled it beautifully. And I do have a question here from somebody, anonymous question. What do you think is the minimum traffic to this source of research, please. So if we're talking about the different research methods that rely on traffic, is there a minimum that you aim to have, Georgie, or is it something that you just work with and don't think too much about?
Yeah, I don't really think too much about it because I guess it's a case-by-case basis depending on what website you're dealing with. Also, if we're talking about the Mouseflow research methods, it's more about just making sure you have enough recordings there that you can gather insights on. So you don't really necessarily need to aim for a traffic number. It's just making sure you've got enough to validate your issue or something that you've spotted.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to read through here. Okay, so I have here one from Leona. We have a sale coming up shortly. Will you start analyzing your site beforehand and implementing changes during the sale campaign to try to improve its results? Or would you analyze during the sale as the uplift in traffic would give you better findings? So I'm guessing we're talking e-commerce, right? So they have a sale coming up and they want to know if you should start analyzing and implementing changes during the sale campaign or to try to improve the results, or would you analyze during the sale as the uplift in traffic will give you better findings? So before and after the sale.
Well, and after, I'd probably do both. You'd probably want to get a baseline to understand what's happening before the sale goes live, and then do something. You could probably monitor whilst it's live, and then do
Yeah.
some after as well.
I would say just be careful of anything that you put out there while you have the sale going on, because if you break it, then then the campaign will not be as effective. So just make sure that, yes, do benchmark beforehand, right, of what is going on, and try to set up a few experiments that you can test in not in production environment but outside, and then push them live if you see that it has a high impact and the potential of being high to have better results, I guess.
Also, if they're doing a sale and worried about something breaking or happening during the sale, just testing to maybe a lower percentage of the audience might be the way to go.
Yes, exactly. I have another one. It's great that we had time to go through this. Thank you everyone for the participation. So I have one from this, I'm guessing it's the same anonymous person. How often is a good frequency for conducting research to fill the backlog with new ideas?
So I would say you should always be doing some sort of research in the background because things are always changing on your website. So like I was saying with that affinity loop at the start, every time that you circle around that process and you make changes or you make tweaks, your user behavior and your research is going to change on the left-hand side again. So I'd say every time you've gone through sort of one cycle of doing a load of changes or bug fixes or tests, come back to the research again and just make sure that everything's still working. Or is the same as it was before, or if things have changed, you might then need to go back to your backlog and refine it, as I said again. So like it's always going to be a continuous process, and your backlog's probably not going to stay in one list that's always going to stay the same. It's going to be moving around constantly. So I'd say, yeah, cycle back every time you've done a big bulk of changes or tests.
Yeah, good. And that same person, I think, exactly, I can see the name. It's asking about what tools are you using that integrates with Mouseflow, and for this process, what tools do you use that integrated with Mouseflow?
We use convert.com for testing, which integrates with Mouseflow, so we can watch back how the variations perform, and also dynamic yield as well. So they're the two testing platforms that we use that both integrate with Mouseflow.
Yeah, and outside of that, we integrate with most platforms out there, and if there's no integration available, our support team is always available to work on new things. They actually get excited when they get new requests on integration. So if at any point you're facing that one of the tools that you're using in your stack, it doesn't actually talk to Mouseflow, we can always work on that. And one last question from David Lindner. How would you handle situations when no A/B testing is available?
I would say changes are fine as long as you're monitoring them. We do some things as just changes if we don't feel they need to be A/B tested, but just make sure that I would sort of call it a linear test anyway, because you put the test live, the change live, monitor that change for 2 weeks and compare it to the previous 2 weeks. And then you're sort of still doing an A/B test, but you're putting it live instead.
Yeah.
And also, if you can't do A/B testing, then do some user testing or some validation through things like Usability Hub, and then you can sort of test designs and things like that instead.
Absolutely. And I think that covers, I just want to mention, Leona, that you have a sale coming up. I just published a post on prepping for sales, Black Friday, the holidays and whatnot. So you might want to check that out on my LinkedIn profile. I guess it has an article as well, a comprehensive article on just getting ready for sales, and covers a little bit of what you were mentioning. We're right on the nick of time, Georgie. It's been amazing to work with you throughout this process. We've been prepping for this for a while. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your time. And I definitely look forward to doing more of these sessions with you. You have a lot to share. So thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.